Good day. I'm Mr. Ishala, and I welcome you once again to the Progressive Learning class. We continue our econometric series today with econometric research stages. When the discussion on econometric research stages come on board, you can call it same thing as econometrics methodology. Now, in econometrics, we attempt to evaluate, analyze, and empirically verify economic theories. But the question now is, how does an econometrician go about in his econometrics analysis? How is it done? And this is what we call econometrics methodology, and it's also the same thing as the econometric research stages. It is important to know that here in this video I'll be covering the classical methodology of econometrics, or put it the traditional methodology of econometrics, and these are the stages of econometric research stages. In an econometric studies, we start first with the statement of econometric theory. That is the theory we want to verify or state an econometric problem or an hypothesis that we are interested in analyzing, making an empirical analyzing. Now we must not forget, from our previous video on explanation of econometrics, we can get a glimpse that econometrics bridge the gap between the entire abstract economic theory and the real world data, that is real world reality. That is, we're using data now to verify economic theory. So the first thing, we start with the statement of the theory, e.g., the demand theory. We say that there's an inverse relationship between the price of a commodity and the price. Then after we have this, the next thing we go with the specification of a mathematical model, and this is job majorly of mathematical economists. That is, the theory or the problem or the hypothesis we've stated here, we tend to turn them into a mathematical model. And after we done this, the next thing we make a specification of econometric model. What is this saying? We are this our mathematical model, we turn it now to econometrics model. How do we do that? We do that simply by introducing what we call a random or a disturbing or an error term into the mathematical model. Noting that econometric model is looking at the a stochastic relationship, that is the erotic variable, that is the erotic relationship, that is the unpredictable element is included in the model. And this is majorly because economics studies majorly human behavior that you cannot measure exactly. It's an uncontrolled experiment. So for us to analyze an uncontrolled situation, we have to bring in these our error terms, and when the inclusion of this error term in your mathematical model makes the model an econometric model. Now going forward, after that, we have to collect real world data. We are collecting this data so that we can estimate the parameter in our econometrics model. That is, in our econometrics model, that you can estimate the parameter. But the parameter you are talking about the slopes and the coefficient of the independent variable. Then after we're done with that, we next stage we move to hypothesis testing. Now we're having a parameter we have actually formed. Now we have to test for the statistical significance of these parameters, because this data we collected is a sample, and we want to make inference about the population. We have to make generalization. For this to happen, we have to apply our knowledge of hypothesis testing to actually test, to verify the parameters we actually find if it is statistically significant with the hypothesis or the econometric theory or the stated problem of interest. Then once this has been verified, then we move toward the forecasting and prediction. Our model, we want to be able to forecast with our model, and we want to be able to make prediction with our model. It is important to know that there's a gap between forecasting and prediction. When you are talking about forecasting, you are using real world data to make a forecast. You're talking about a prediction, you don't actually need data to make predictions, since you know that there is a relationship, there is an infinite relationship between quantity demand and price, then you can make a prediction that yes, this is what's going to happen to the quantity demanded. But when we're talking about what forecasting, then you need an actually what data to make forecasting. So with our verified econometric model, then we can make a what forecasting and prediction, and also we are going to be able to make what a control or policy explanation. That is, we can use this model to control an economy, to make policies, economic policies, policies that affect the economic variables can be made on these models. Now, this is just an introduction to economic research stage. I'll be going further. I'll be taking each of these stages one by one. I'll be discussing them in details. Let's go on. Statement of economic theory, problem or hypothesis. The very first stage into our econometric studies is to state the econometric theory of interest or an econometric problem, an economic problem or an economic hypothesis, or an hypothesis in respect to any economic relationship that one is of interest. Now, to illustrate here, we're using the German-Keynes consumption function. In German-Keynes consumption function, he postulated a theory, the absolute income hypothesis, where he stated that men and women are disposed to increase their consumption as their income increases, but not as much as the increase in their income. Like, by implication, by the statement of these theories implies that when income increases by, let's say, 60%, the consumption of an individual also increases, but the increase in consumption is less than 60%. The consumption could have increased maybe like 30 or 40%, but never as 60%. This is what this hypothesis, the absolute income hypothesis by German-Keynes, states about what consumption and income relationship. Now, in our econometric studies, we make an attempt to verify this theory. That's what we are making an attempt to, and we started first by stating this economic theory. The next stage after the statement of economic theory, problem or hypothesis is the specification of the mathematical model. The Keynesian consumption theories can be specified mathematically thus. Now, that theory actually says that there's a relation between the consumption and the disposable income, in which it states that as income increases, the consumption also increases. That is, there's a positive relationship between income and consumption. This can be clearly presented mathematically as this. That is, consumption. We have consumption as a function of our disposable income YD with our consumption equals to beta naught plus beta 1 disposable income. Now, if we can equate our consumption to be Y, then we equate our disposable income to be S, then we're having something like this with our beta 1 is equals to the marginal propensity to consume, which these functions, this hypothesis try to explain as such that our marginal propensity to consume is greater than 0 but less than 1. Now, to get it more clearly, it is important to have a working understanding of what constitutes a mathematical equation, or rather a mathematical model. Yeah, on our left hand side here, we are having the dependent variable, and on our right hand side, we are having what we call the independent variable. Like, these variable here, they are otherwise called exogenous variable. They determined this endogenous variable. These are variables that you trying to find based on the knowledge of this. You can find this. That's how this is formed. Now, This is just a mathematical model representing the function we described earlier on, and this model can this function can be represented geometrically using our knowledge of economics statistics. Geometrically, we having this function represented thus. This beta naught is the intercept. Is the intercept. Why this is what is the coefficient of our disposable income, otherwise known as the marginal propensity to consume, and this can be represented graphically thus. The specification of econometric model. Now we already have it in a mathematical model. Now we have to specify it in an econometric model for us to make an empirical study of the said economic theory. Now this in a mathematical model, we don't have these error terms in our model. But now in econometric model, in addition to what we have in a mathematical model, now we have the error terms. We have our error terms, and what this implies is if we collect a real data of consumption and income and we plot it on a graph, we will realize that there are some points that are outside our line of best fit, which means there are certain variations, and these variations is due to some unidentified variables in this our model, and this unidentified variable is not specified by these error terms in this our econometric model. In this way, we are able to make a more empirical and accurate studies of this function. So to put it very simple, from your mathematical model to econometric model, what you just have to do is you have to include your disturbance or error terms into the model. Then the model now turn into econometric model, which is ready for empirical analysis. The next stage after the specification of econometrics model is the collection of data. There's a need to collect data as regards to the relevant variables in econometrics model. Data is needed as regards majorly our independent variable. Now, for the collection of data, there's a need for us to understand two major things, which are the sources of data and the types of data we have. Now, what are the sources of data? We have primary data and we have secondary data. Primary sources of data, these are data the researchers collected himself for the purpose of Of analysis. Now, for the purpose of making an empirical analysis of the concerned theories, the researchers could actually go into the field and collect raw data by himself, and those data is called primary sources of data. This data could collect through a survey, use of questionnaires, and etc. Now, the second source of data, these are standard data that have already been collected by a statistical institution such as Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, or data that is available like the Central Bank of Nigeria release data annually. You can source that in your studies. That is the secondary source of data. They are data collected not for the primary purpose of the analysis the researcher is interested in, but they are just collected for the sake of having the data, and you can use such data for your analysis. Although this data it is always more valuable to use primary sources of data, but the primary source of data happens to be more costly than this secondary source of data. So majorly, most researchers tend to use secondary sources of data mostly for their analysis. Now, after understanding the sources of data, then you have to understand the types of data you need for your analysis. Now, there are three major types of data. We have time series data, we have the cross-sectional data, and we have the panel data. Now, it is important for the researchers to identify the data it needs for the purpose of his empirical studies. Now, what are time series data? Time series data, this is data in respect to a variable across a long period of time. That is a data about a variable or an economic variable over a long period of time. You can collect data over income, that is disposable income, let's say from 1990 to 2022. That is a time series data. It's a data over about an economic variable, which is then the disposable income, over a long period of time, across different time period, across different point in time. Also, we can collect data as regards the GDP of a country over across months, or let's say different quarters, like first quarter in 2022, second quarter in 2022, third quarter. That is still a time series data. All that is important is that this data is about a particular variable across series of time, across a long period of time, over sequence of time. That's time series data. Now, cross-sectional data, these are data over many variables at a point in time. As is, let's say we have data over about the GDP of a country, the income of a country, the price level of a country, the unemployment rate of a country. All these variables at a particular point in time. Let's say this quarter, this year, this month. Then that is a cross-sectional data. It's a data of so many variables at just a certain point in time, at a specific point in time. That's the cross-sectional data. Now, what is a panel data? Panel data, or a longitudinal data, is an amalgamation of cross-sectional data and time series data. Is a data of so many economic variables across a different point in time. That is the word, a panel data. And for the purpose of estimating the parameters in an econometrics variable, it is important that we collect the relevant data types from the convenient and most appropriate data sources for our econometrics analysis. The next step after the collection of data is the estimation of parameters. There's a need to estimate the parameters in our econometrics relationship. By the parameters, we mean our beta naught and beta 1 in the stated example. So basically, the regression analysis is the major tool used in econometrics in estimating parameters. This is our econometrics model. Now our special econometrics model, this was the econometrics model, and now this econometrics model, when we estimate it, it now change to the y change to y cap, and our beta change to beta cap, beta 1 change to beta 1 cap. Like this y cap means y estimate, this beta naught cap means beta naught estimate, and this beta 1 cap means beta 1 cap estimate. We should not forget, this is our intercept and this is our slope. Now, how do we find this, our beta naught and beta 1? How do we find their cap? How do we estimate them? Basically, in econometrics regression analysis, there are the number of methods used in estimation, and this we have the ordinary least square method, we have the two-stage least square method, we have the three-stage least square method, we have the weighted least square method, we have the maximum likelihood method, and these are all, and there is more method used in econometrics estimation. In this our econometric series, we focusing our discussion mainly on the ordinary least square method. Now, this is what it looks like when we actually estimate our y cap. This is what it looks like. We find our intercept and we find our slope. This is stating us that for every one increase in our x, there is an 0.7 increase in our y, which is our dependent variable. This is the estimation of parameters. Now, the next stage after estimation of a parameter will be hypothesis testing. Hypothesis testing. After our estimation, we want to know how reliable the parameters we have estimated is. We want to know if our model, the estimated model, if it is reliable enough for our predictions and economic policy formulation. So this brings us to the hypothesis testing. And in our hypothesis testing, or the testing of our model, our estimated model, there are three major criteria which we look at. Number one, we look at the a priori test, or the a priori criteria. And what this is talking about is we compare what we got, as in we compare our estimated model with what, with the stated economic theory. Like the theory we using for this sake of the discussion, the consumption function by John Maynard Keynes postulated that our marginal propensity to consume is what, is positive, and it is greater than 0 but less than 1. And from here, our marginal propensity to consume that we estimated is 0.7, which is definitely not negative, greater than 0 and less than 1. This has already passed the a priori test. Now the next test we do is what we conduct the statistical test. And we talk about statistical test. We start our statistical test by formulating our known hypothesis and our alternate hypothesis. Now the known hypothesis is the hypothesis the researchers is willing to reject, is aiming at rejecting, while the alternate hypothesis is the hypothesis the researchers accepted on the ground that the known hypothesis has been rejected. Hypotheses are majorly a scientific guess. They are conjectural statements. Now, after formulate our known hypothesis, our alternate hypothesis, in this case, our known hypothesis will be such that there is no statistical significance between this estimated beta 1, that will be non-statistical significance, and this our alternate hypothesis will be there is statistical significance. Now the next thing is we subject this into statistical test. There are a number of statistical tests. We have the T test, the T statistics, we have the F statistic, the T statistics, we have the F statistics, we have the chi-square, we have ANOVA and etc. We subject this to this test. We have to see, in subjecting it to this test, we have to select the appropriate one to use. This T statistics is majorly used when we are testing between the one independent variable and one dependent variable. This T statistics is used to test for the statistical significance between one independent variable and one dependent variable, while F statistics is used to test the statistical significance between more than one independent variable on a dependent variable. After we done our statistical testing, then the statistical testing is also referred as the first derivative. Then we have the econometrics test, which is the second derivative. And here we test for autocorrelation, we test for heteroscedasticity, we test for multicollinearity. Our main point is to see if our estimated parameters, our estimated model, if it is reliable enough for our prediction and policy formulation. Now, what is important for us to note in our econometric testing, we are majorly testing for the major assumption of our error terms. That's what we are majorly testing. Autocorrelation. If these error times, like we having error times 1, error times 2, if there is a correlation between the two of them, we're talking of autocorrelation, we talk heteroscedasticity, will indicate whereby the variance of this our error times is not constant. Multicollinearity, when we having a situation whereby there's a correlation between, we have two independent variables and there's a correlation between them, we have the multicollinearity. So this is hypothesis testing, and once this hypothesis went on this hypothesis testing, we tend to accept these models that we have estimated. We tend to accept these theories, empirically verify, or we reject it. If this empirically verified, then we move on to the next stage, which is forecasting and prediction, which means our theory is reliable, it is useful, and we can adopt it in our forecasting, prediction, and policy formulation. But if it is not verifiable on the part of this hypothesis testing, then that theory is what is refuted. The next stage is forecasting and prediction. Once the model have been verified, that is the hypothesis testing, you verify that the model is reliable, then this model can be used for forecasting, then prediction. And what do you mean by forecasting and prediction? Like, by forecasting and prediction is that if you are given the level of what of income, disposable income, let's say we have 500 billion rather. If you substitute this 500 billion for S year, you can predict or you can forecast the value of what of consumption. You can forecast the consumption. Like, you can forecast it, you can predict it. Like, that's what forecasting and prediction is. Because then also you can use this model for control and policy purpose. And what does that imply? Let's say the country want to have a level of consumption. They assume that the level of consumption, let's say a consumption of 70 billion. Consumption of 70 billion is enough to maintain full employment in the economy. Now they have to know that what level of income do they need to what for them to have this. That's for control and policy purposes. So if you make estimate of the formula in this equation and you solve for S, then you can determine the level of income that is needed to have this level of consumption. And this is how policy and control of the economy is actually taking place. And with this, we come to the end of our econometric research stages. I hope we have a fantastic time learning. If you enjoy it, do us a favor by subscribing to the progressive learning class. Turn on the notification bell